Now let's take a closer look to movement profiles. Movement profiles aggregate user data. When and what was done and where did it take place? All this data can be collected if the user has a smartphone, goes to the internet, has other electronic devices. Then all these devices make it possible. All these devices collect data, and from this data it's possible to see what a user did and when one can get a very deep insight into the personal life of a person. So the typically understanding of the movement profiles relates to location-based profiles. Where, when, and how long were users in one place? What was the next place? How they moved from one place to another. Other movement profiles are application profiles. So it's not only interesting to see on which location a user is, it's also very interesting to see what kind of application a user is using. How does a user moves around within an application? For example, in an internet browser or an email client. How a user surfs in the internet. What is he looking? Which kind of URL is he selecting? What's interesting for him on that website? What's not interesting? Which pages he or she is visiting? When and how long the pages are visited. Such data collection does not always have to be anonymous. The name of a person can also be assigned, because for some services one needs to know the user. So it is not difficult to connect, we speak of aggregate such data, to learn more about a person, about the activities of a person, about a person's life. The profiles can be created by different devices. For example, by mobile phones, but also RFID chips help to collect data, smart cards, cameras, constructing Wi-Fi networks. Because in a Wi-Fi network, one sees who is associated to an access point. Browsers, of course, are a source to get information about the activities of our users. Or third-party websites that are visited, and many more applications, devices, tools collect data about a person that can be aggregated. Why such profiles are of interest for companies and for agencies. For example, surveillance questions or the personalized advertisement analysis. This is based on receiving such data to immediately start a kind of activity. Let's have a closer look to mobile phone tracking with GSM. When you start with your mobile and after power on, the mobile phone always connects with a mobile phone site, typically with a cell tower that's the closest in your neighborhood. This is necessary so that the communication company is able to see when you are calling and to organize a connection to the one you want to call with. So the network operator, they store the ID of the mobile site and the time at which a mobile phone was connected. This is necessary, otherwise they cannot provide their service. Then the mobile site has a certain range. It's with radio data, so typically a few hundred meters in a city or up to 35 kilometers in countryside. This is the neighborhood one can move with having a connection to a cell tower. it makes it possible to determine the parameter in which the mobile phones were located. What is not possible? It's not possible to find out the direction from the science point of view. So if this is a circle, then it's not clear whether the user is here or here, but what is known that the user is in that environment of the sites. So the transmission range from cell science may overlap, so this helps to get more information. For example, here in this example, we have 2 overlapping, even 3 overlapping areas from such sites, and then it's clear if a mobile phone user can connect to this site, and to that site, then it's necessary, then one knows exactly that he is within that area. So this area is much smaller than the circle around one of the sites. So the position can then be determined more precisely. Here one speaks from triangulation. Meanwhile, such mobile phone tracking is being offered as a service. So you can download apps which help you to find the location of an owner of a mobile phone. In Germany, for example, to speak about regulation, new data retention law passed in 2015 tells that connection data must be stored for 10 weeks. It must be stored who was called, and the date, the time, the duration of the call need to be stored. The location data must be stored for 4 weeks. And the currently suspended due to lawsuits. So the question is, these are requests from the authorities which have to guarantee security. So they want to have the possibility to investigate criminal activities by means of such data. But of course, the data are stored and are collected without knowing whether this is a criminal or not. When these connection data and publicly available data from the internet, for example, such as Twitter data or blogs, then if this data can be brought together, a very accurate movement profile of a person can be created. So knowing where is the mobile phone of a user, typically then the user has this with him or her, and taking other informations, then one is able to reconstruct over the time how a person is moving. And exactly this movement profiles. For example, data that were published on Green Party politician Malte Spitz in Germany shows how this could look like. So on his website he showed this, and here he's living and bringing together information from Twitter activity, from the incoming calls, from the outgoing calls. One can exactly say and see and reconstruct that on 1st September 9 o'clock and 1 minute 29 seconds, this person, this Malte Spitz, was in that area. Only from tracking the mobile phone with GSM. GPS is another possibility to get location data, as well as GLONASS, Baidu and Galileo. The receiver, here for example a mobile phone, receives position data from satellites and can thus calculate its own position. You know this from a car. A navigation system, a car, needs this data to find out where is the car now and what is the goal the car wants to reach, and to compute the best connection. So there are satellites, and these are the different systems which, when a person gets contact by this GPS system to several satellites, then from the positions of the satellites, one can exactly compute the position of that person. Navigation systems need this, but also other location-based information need such GPS data. For example, if you want to use a service in your smartphone which shows you the next Italian restaurant or others, first the location needs to be found out, then to compute which is the closest restaurant, and then check in the database whether it's an Italian one. So for precise position determination, the receiver must have contact with at least 4 satellites. The location within GPS is much more precise than the position, the location data one can get from the GSM system. From the GSM system, one has to see whether there's an overlap of the different sites. But here, with the GPS system, which has a system with GPS that has connections to at least 4 satellites, one can exactly precise compute where the person, the car, or whatever is located. The communication inside GPS itself is anonymous. So here, with the computing of the position, this is completely independent of the name of a person or the ID. So it is anonymous, but nevertheless, the apps can collect GPS data and then send this data to the application server. For example, to the application that recommends restaurants. So they need the data to be able to answer a question and send a recommendation for the next restaurant. But then the application provider has all this data. Also the data of the person, the movement data of the person, the GPS information. And it's not clear what the provider is doing with that data. So for example, with Android systems, you can view stored GPS data in the Google account. Here is the website. You can find out the data, location data of a person. This was what is possible by smartphones and devices over the GSM or the GSP. Let's have a look to another collector of data, to another device, to RFID chips. RFID, radio frequency identification, it's a technology for transceiver systems, very small. So the RFID transponder can be of the size of a rice grain and is able, for example, in the VR or in other devices to collect data. The RFID chip have a permanent memory which contains the identity. Also application of user data is possible, so that the RFID chip, the RFID chip reader can exactly see and get this information from the transponder. So the transponders are read via radio waves. So if such a transponder comes close to an RFID reader, the RFID reader can receive data, can send data, can also send energy, and then the reader can give in the data to any kind of application or to any kind of database. The transponder itself needs an antenna for that radio wave communication. So the use of such RFID tags is RFID chips, responders and systems is to tag objects. For example, to tag patients in a hospital. so that the system knows is he in that clinic or is he with this investigation. One can use such RFID systems for protection against theft of devices. One can use this for kind of identification, because then if someone comes close to such a reader, the reader can see and can find out who is it, and is this allowed to access that service or these data. Also, such RFID chips can be used to receive motion profiles. They can be used to identify and track objects. By the way, this is where they were discovered and developed for. For example, they can identify and track packages, clothes, and others. RFID chips in smart cards or in clothing can be used to create motion profiles. They need this data, they need to collect this data to provide the service they are designed for, but then this data are in the world, and then this data could be used also for other purposes. Sometimes the people are not aware of this. Sometimes the people know. For the hospital, the patient is explained that this receiver helps to find and to organize transport and other things. But sometimes the people do not know that in their wear such receivers are installed. With the receivers, with this RFID, it's possible also to get movement data inside buildings. Inside buildings, GPS is not working. So here, with the RFID chips and responders, also a movement inside a building can be recognized. For that reason, antennas need to be installed in every room, and sometimes there are some problems with overlapping signals, but in principle it's possible. Such contactless smart cards are also RFID chips. RFID chips which usually also have a processor. Here, that's an example of a German ID card. These smart cards have a check card format. They are used as ID cards. They are used for access control. They are used as cash cards, tickets, credit cards, and others. So tickets, for example, in the form of such smart cards, can generate motion profiles, like storing the entry or exit stations. Here are some examples, for example, smart card for the usage of public transportation. To perform the service that by means of such a card, the user can step into such a bus or a tram, the control is by checking the RFID communication, which says, yes, this person is identified, has paid the service. But of course, this data then are in the world and can also be used for creating motion profiles. Another source of data to create motion profiles are surveillance cameras. Surveillance cameras are used to increase the security in public places, in railway stations, in airports, buildings, and others. And this is helpful because then it's more easy, for example, to find criminals or to detect if there are problems. But with the appropriate software, people can be differentiated by their faces, by their body shapes, by their clothes and others. So one can use and investigate these videos which are recorded, for example, to find out whether there was a person in a certain point of time in this location. So it can be determined when and where a person was captured on the cameras. And then this data can be linked to the data, then the data can be linked to other data from other cameras. So one can not only see the movement inside the viewing field of a camera, one can connect this also with other camera's viewing field and then get an informative movement profile. For example, in China, the CCTV surveillance networks includes 170 million cameras. So it took 7 minutes to locate and catch a BBC reporter after he was added to the suspect's database. By connecting all the data of this huge amount of surveillance cameras, by interconnecting them and then applying software which can identify persons, automatically identify persons on that images. Last but not least, to mention motion profiles on the internet. Also, the storage of websites visited, how many, when, how often, how long, and so on, gives a lot of data which tells a lot about a person. The data differs for most people. So one can use this data to identify a person. So internet usage profiles, now it's no motion in the physical world, it is motion in the virtual world. So internet usage profiles can be received, for example, from the history activity file of a browser. Here you see the chronic of a browser, and then you see exactly which website was visited at which time by a user. So third-party providers can also create such profiles. They can do this through their own content on different websites. For example, social networks, Facebook like buttons, which are on many websites, and not only on the Facebook websites. By means of this link buttons, it's possible also for Facebook to see when a user visited this page. Sharing on Twitter is similar. Advertisement banners. This is the idea of such advertisement banner of the same service on different pages helps for the advertising company to collect the data, the visiting data of a user, the usage data, also from websites that are not the own one. So this is also possible by means of third-party JavaScript files on different pages. If you want to protect against such things, there are available browser plugins like, let's take Firefox web browser as an example, like NoScript or Google, Facebook, Twitter Disconnect, AdBlock Plus, which can block such tracking code and other unwanted content. So if you are not agree with such kind of that third parties find out how you move in the internet, there are possibilities which in this case, in this example described for Firefox, which blocks such tracking code and other unwanted contacts. But many modern websites do not work without JavaScript. If you switch off the JavaScript, then many of the functionality of a website is no more available. It depends from the model, and it depends from the configuration in which way browsers send data to central services. Central service that allowing tracking, for example, in the case of Google Chrome. Here there is the advanced settings for Google Chrome. It's possible to make decisions, for example, use a web service to help resolve navigation errors, use a prediction service to help complete search and URLs typed in the. So there are many possibilities you are asked to decide whether you allow Google to access the data or whether you are not allowing Google to access this data, here in this example of Google Chrome. Then web services and navigation and form data with the data of the currently accessed page for correction of navigation errors, spelling check, or completion. So here, this is a request to you that they want to get the data in order to increase and improve the service. Prefetches of resources functions also send partially entered URLs to the web service so that the people there could see what you are interested in, what the users are interested in. The manufacturers have, of course, a legitimate interest in getting usage statistics. They want to know in which way users use their services, use their website, use their resources in order to improve their business, in order to focus on particular useful effects. But which information are sent? To whom? This remains often not transparent. And this is a problem, and here the users need to be more careful with their data. So the data, the usage data, they have a value. They have an important value for the manufacturers. So the user should insist finding out in which way manufacturers can access data and under what conditions. But caution, if enabled, do not track settings is sent as a request to site operators, but it's not a legally binding obligation for them. This is also with other things. So it's a wish, but there are no possibility and no force to guarantee that even if you have desired that your activities are not tracked, then that these activities are tracked. Let's draw some conclusion about motion profiles. Digital technologies and innovative features enrich our everyday life with many amenities. So people are happy, people are using this. These services are very popular, which can be provided by means of this digital technology. But the downside is we leave data. We leave data that can be tracked. We leave very sensitive personal information, for example, our health data, that can be stored externally. And it's not, for us, the user, it's not clear where our very sensible health data, private health data, or motion data are stored externally and under which conditions. If you do not want to live without new digital technologies, then you can hardly avoid data traces. You can hardly avoid motion profiles. But it is possible to limit the collection of personal data. How you can do this? For example, only activate GPS location service on smartphones when this information is needed, or when you want to use an application that needs such GPS position. Only turn on internet on smartphone when necessary. This helps to restrict the collection of personal data. Another idea, another possibility is to block third-party cookies in browser settings, or prohibit JavaScript by third parties with browser plugins. So you can make selections in most recent browsers to improve privacy, but often you have to pay with less that the service could not more provide it in the full context. For example, if you switch off JavaScript, it helps to make tracking your activities more difficult, but it also decreases the functionality of the website. Most important is one should think about that. One should make informed decisions what kind of data collection you will allow and what not.